First question is, can you tell us a little bit about your journey towards financial freedom and how did you get into it and where would you say you are now?
Well, that's a lot of questions in one. Um, I'll start off with my journey towards financial freedom, and I think for me, financial freedom isn't necessarily the absence of debt. For me, it's having that comfortability to not worry about finances and being in a place of comfort. So, how did I actually get into that? I think it's important to note that when I was in secondary school, I was very much supported by my parents financially. I did work multiple part-time jobs at various points. I worked everywhere. I worked from Papa John's to Pizza Hut or Co-op or even Shell petrol station. But that was never about um, sustaining myself for necessity. That was always giving me room for more comfort. But then as I went to university, the way it works with student loan was my student loan wasn't a lot because of my parents' financial status. But I was going to a very expensive uni. And unfortunately, student loan doesn't factor in, for example, how many siblings you have or what your parents' disposable income may actually be. So I was left with a small loan, but big expenditures, well, or big obligations to fill. So at uni, I was a maths tutor for first and second year. Then I also worked in the SU bar and in the kitchen. And that was all about creating space so that I could, pay my rent, pay my bills, and then have a bit of flexibility to enjoy myself, to try and not worry about money. But as I stand now in terms of financial freedom, I would like to say I'm in a very financial free place. I'm in a very blessed situation. I have a good job. I work in a bank and I'm living at home with my parents. So I do have that financial flexibility, that financial freedom now, which, yeah, I'm grateful for.
So the second question is, how do you set yourself realistic and malleable financial goals? And can you give us an example of one?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it's important to make sure your financial goals are personal to you and they're within your own means. I think that's what a lot of people tend to forget. They set their standards, they set their goals based on other people or other people's objectives. So I think the first thing is to look at yourself, at your surroundings, and then it's a lot easier to set realistic goals. You have to find that balance between what are my wants and what are my needs. So an example is in my my first and second year of uni, for me, my goal was to make sure I had enough money to pay my rent and be able to go out with my friends and not miss out university like opportunities and experiences. Whereas in my third year, my goal was, okay, this is my last year of uni. My goal is that at the end of uni, I'll have enough money so that I can go traveling. I wanted to go to Thailand for 3 weeks on a solo trip. So that was my goal for the year. And that was within reach and distance for me. I think I had an inclination to be like, okay, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z, go on 5 different trips with all different friends, but that just wasn't realistic for me. So I did what actually worked.
So the next question is, what would you say are the 3 top saving and spending habits we should try and stick to?
Okay, that's a good question. I think my most important financial saving tip, spending habit tip is all about pausing. So before you purchase anything, I always try and pause. I try to think, okay, rather than behaving impulsively, I am consciously aware of my goals. I'm consciously aware of my targets. But in moments of impulse, you may not be thinking logically, for instance. So, for example, got a good example, lockdown. Everyone's saying during lockdown, people are impulsively shopping on the internet, which I nearly fell into. When we first got into lockdown, my impulse was, you know what, I'm going to buy myself a new TV, a PS4, and then an Apple Watch so I can track my running. That's a lot of stuff to be buying. So I think, but then what I did was what my mum and my brother, and this is kind of our thing in our house, did. They encouraged me to say, pause on it, wait a few days and then decide. And then after pausing, I was like, you know what, probably don't actually want or need that. I'd say the second thing is the use of separate bank accounts. So the way I work financially at the moment is I have two bank accounts. I have a Lloyd's account and a Monzo account. My salary goes into my Lloyd's account, and then I transfer my monthly spending into my Monzo account. So being able to segregate your money in this way means that it allows you to, when you look at your Monzo account, okay, this is my spending money, without the back of your head thinking, restraint on that. And it's easy because then it means that you don't have to always be thinking about it consciously. You just have it already divided for you. And then the last one, useful habit, would probably be, the word I used was playfulness. And the reason I said that is it's important to also not be obsessive when it comes to saving and spending, because money isn't the end all and be all, and you don't want it to become the forefront of your mind and attention. So what I try to do is I try to put myself in a situation where, okay, if I have a certain budget for spending, maybe I'll add 10% onto that to allow me the playfulness to, treat myself, to enjoy different things and not be so focused on saving and spending.
So the next question is, what are the different types of ISAs available, and how can I know which one is right for me?
Yeah. Well, ISAs, for those who might not know what that is an individual savings account. And the reason that they're useful is, when you get to a point where you've accumulated wealth, you've accumulated savings, they're tax-free. So normally in our tax system, the interest that you gain, the interest you gain on your money is known as capital gains, and your capital gains is taxable. But if your money is within an ISA account, that's not taxable. So at the moment, that's probably not your biggest concern unless you're a secret millionaire. But as you start accumulating that wealth, as you start saving more and more, that will become more important down the line. But which ISAs are available for you? Well, if you're under the age of 18, you can open a junior ISA, which I would highly recommend. I'm not sure how knowledgeable or how aware everyone is of what's going on in the economy at the moment, but we've got really low interest rates. Banks or monetary policy committees, governments are worried about us going into a recession. So interest rates are low, but in junior ISAs at the moment, you can get interest rates of around 3%, which is way above market rate. I think the ISA I have at the moment is 0.1%. So essentially, if I save £100, I get 10p, which is quite sad. But then once you get to 18, you can open adult ISAs and get 0.1% like myself. Or you can open lifetime ISAs. So lifetime ISAs are for people who are saving for either retirement or for deposit on their first house. And essentially the government gives you 25% interest up to £4,000 worth of savings. So you can save up to £4,000, and then the government will give you, if you put in £1,000 worth of interest. But that's a whole other conversation about saving for a house, deposits and stuff like that.
So the next question is, I'm only 16. Isn't it too early for me to be concerned about financial literacy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, it's never too early to have knowledge. It's never too early to be aware of your surroundings. As a lot of people say or perpetuate that we live in a world which is spun by money. And I think, unfortunately, there is some truth to that. So it's important to be financially literate so you can navigate the world, because money is a useful asset and money has the means which allows you to do other things. But on top of that, as much as it is important to be financially literate, it's important to live in the now. So if you're 16 and maybe you don't have any financial pressures, I don't know, you might not have any financial pressures. Yes, it's nice on the side to start developing that knowledge, but definitely don't obsess about it. Don't make that, the center of gravity of your attention.
So another question is, where could I go to understand about the stock market?
Okay, so I have controversial advice about stock markets. My personal advice, bearing in mind that I work in a bank, is I would not advise anyone to invest in single stocks. I think, unfortunately, there's this thing called survivorship bias, which means that in markets, well, it's the same in life. So survivorship bias is only the people who succeed essentially blow their trumpet. So it's the people who make a lot of money on the stock market, the people who are successful. Those are the stories that you hear about, but you tend not to hear about stories of people who've lost all their money or lost a significant amount of their money. So if we use like a practical example, if you put £100 into a FTSE 100 FTSE 100 ETF at the start of this year, in March, your £100 would now be £70. And that only sounds like a £30 loss per se, but then what happens if you make that magnitude £10,000? You took £10,000 in and now it was only worth 7,000. You've lost £3,000 in 3 months. So I would always caution on stock market in general. I would say that ETFs are a good way of getting into the market. So an ETF is an exchange traded fund. So rather than one single stock, it's a collection of multiple different stocks all bundled into one. So it's less risky as you have exposure to multiple. And then if you invest in that, I'd say that's a relatively good option if that's something that you're interested in. But I'd say there's 2 bits of advice I'd give if that's what you want to do. The first is you need to recognize that your money is at risk and you have to decide whether you're comfortable with your money being at risk. If you don't want to lose any money under any circumstances, then stock markets aren't for you. And then you also need to realize that stock markets are best suited for those with a long-term investment horizon. So essentially, it's best to invest in stock markets if you have a 5-year, 10-year outlook. You put your money in there and that's it. You don't think about it again for another 5 years, and then you see what money you've made. But for those who are interested in that sort of thing, there's a really good app that I use, which is Free Trade. So it's essentially commission-free access to the market, which is really useful.
So the next question is, where would you say I can go to find the best resources or places to learn more about financial literacy at my age?
Well, I think first and foremost, the internet is, as we all know, an amazing source of information. A website which I tend to go to, find very useful, is Money Saving Expert. So that's Money Saving Expert. That's a really, really good website. I'd also say YouTube can be quite good. I think when I have a particular financial goal, for example, like how to save for a holiday or how to save for a deposit, if you go on YouTube, there's people who make videos specifically on those kind of goals, and it's interesting to pick bits of their knowledge. Of course, you don't want to take anyone's word completely as it is, and you want to find the wisdom that lies within their entire speech. But a book which I would say is really useful is For the Love of Money by Sam Polk. And the reason I would recommend that book is when I was your age, I was very, very much interested in being financially liberated or accumulating wealth. I think that book gives you a good perspective of money and its limitation. I would hope that everyone know that money is a means of access to certain things, but within itself, it can't truly bring happiness. Others may disagree with that, but that's how I personally feel about the matter. So I think that's a really good book. It's about a banker whose sole focus was chasing wealth, chasing money, and he did it. He worked on Wall Street. He got that penthouse apartment. He was earning hundreds of thousands, millions in bonuses. But in that, he couldn't satisfy the emptiness which was within him. I think with money, it's also important that it doesn't become idolized and it's always within perspective.
So my next question is, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to enter into the same industry that you're in?
Okay. Well, the finance industry is famously competitive. In people's first years of university, they offer spring weeks and then in their second years, they offer summer internships, and then obviously they have grad schemes. And the way that it works is they tend to filter people through. So what I mean by that is they might take a cohort of spring interns, and those who perform successfully will be offered a summer internship. And then those who then go on to the summer internship, if they perform successfully, then they'll be put onto the graduate scheme. But there's also opportunities to, enter the summer internship directly or enter the graduate scheme directly. So I'd say look out for opportunities to get in as early as possible, because at spring weeks is when there's most opportunity. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say the most important thing you can do is stand out. And that sounds very cringe and very cliche, and how is everyone supposed to stand out if that's what you're telling every single person? But it's more about, if you write a cover letter, which is just the same spiel, there's nothing which makes you unique. I mean, your standout doesn't need to be that you climbed Everest. Your standout could be, at school, I worked with this one particular teacher all the time because I wanted to develop my knowledge, and I had a, healthy relationship which allowed me to grow. That's standing out. That's something specific about you, which makes me think, wow, this applies to that person. Which kind of links into not underestimating your uniqueness. So I'd say in application processes, especially when tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are applying for the same role, it's important that you make sure your uniqueness comes out.
The last question is, what were some challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Are you talking like career-wise, financially, or?
Career-wise.
Career-wise, I say the biggest challenge I probably faced was understanding what I wanted to do. I think, the job market as a whole is huge. There's so many different opportunities, especially nowadays where your degree doesn't necessarily limit you to any form of career path. So for me, it was, okay, what do I want to do? Where can I focus and channel my energy? And that's what took a while to navigate. So my first bit of experience, I worked in a financial advisory firm. So they're people who help, people who have money or high incomes or a large amounts of savings manage their money and use this effectively. But that wasn't quite it for me. So then the next internship I did was fixed income quantitative work, which was more mathsy, more technical, more like computer nerd kind of thing. But that didn't have the human element that I wanted in it. So then the next thing I tried was, doing a rotational scheme to hopefully find where my sweet spot was. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge. But of course, the answer to that challenge is trying as many different things as you can, giving yourself exposure to as many different areas, whether that be, careers fairs or stuff like this, where you're doing webinars online, doing your own research, just speaking to people, just to get a flavour and understanding for things.
Okay, thank you. That was the last question. Thank you for participating.
Well, thank you for your questions. They're good questions.